Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. I'm doing this as an alert, and I'm also doing this at an off time. We're not going to do this video as one of our standard every 8 hours videos. I want this out as soon as possible. This is being done as an alert, but this is not a negative alert. I know folks out there are very concerned about the tax situation, all this talk about OECD, all this globalist nonsense. And there seems to be a spot of really good news on this score coming from the United States now, specifically the executive, as Mr. Trump has something to say regarding the OECD, at least as it pertains to the United States. I thought of making this video after reading a recent article, actually it's a recent press release and memorandum, which was actually sent to us by a viewer of the channel. Much appreciated. You'll know who you are. Much appreciated for that, because this is very, very useful information. Let me just dig right into it, and then we'll get into analysis. So this is coming from whitehouse.gov, and the title of the press release is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, Global Tax Deal. This is what I've been talking about. This was Janet Yellen's fevered mushroom dream. Remember, she went up and had some mushrooms with Xi Jinping and tripped, and then came up with, apparently, global minimum tax. Yay, global minimum tax. This was Janet Yellen's idiotic idea where she thought everybody by dint of being born is globally subject to a minimum tax. I think it's nonsense. Looks like Mr. Trump does too, but I like the way it's elucidated the reasoning behind why this is such a problem, because Thailand, you need to listen up. This stuff pertains to Thailand especially right now, and this is why Thailand does not need the OECD. Quoting directly, memorandum for the Secretary of the Treasury. So this is for the Secretary of the Treasury coming from the President of the United States. Quoting, the United States Trade Representative, the permanent representative of the United States to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, subject, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, Global Tax Deal. The OECD Global Tax Deal, supported under the prior administration, not only allows extraterritorial jurisdiction over American income, and I couldn't say it better myself for Thailand. It allows extraterritorial jurisdiction of Thai income, as evidenced by the tax stamp pimps we have running all over Thailand. These are IRS agents, overt IRS agents, operating in direct contravention to the restricted occupations here in Thailand, telling people in Thailand, consulting people in Thailand on how Thai tax law works. And in their opinion, how Thai tax law works is we all got to throw in with this extraterritorial, international, globalist surveillance grid, whereby Thais and everybody that comes into Thailand to do business or to retire here has to be subject to this, and now we all have to have wealth extracted from us by dint of being born. Thank God for Mr. Trump, at least, much like Mr. Gorsuch, or I should say Justice Gorsuch, in his scathing opinion regarding COVID, his magnum opus, if you will, for liberty from the bench. Here Mr. Trump is saying this globally, to the world. This is extraterritorial nonsense having to do with taxation. It isn't good for the national interest of America, and in my opinion, it's not good for the national interest of Thailand. That said, let me quote further. Extraterritorial jurisdiction over American income, but also limits our nation's ability to enact tax policies. Exactly. That serve the interests of American businesses and workers. I couldn't say it better. Same thing for Thailand. It's why we don't need OECD to begin with. And by the way, notwithstanding the machinations of the media here in Thailand, there is no OECD in Thailand. All of this nonsense being brought in by tax pimps stamp pimps, I should say, is coming in under the rubric of, oh, we have to get in line with OECD, and all of this is already a foregone conclusion. It is not. There is no affirmative duty that says you owe tax by dint of being born. I don't care what these people have to say. I don't care what these agents of the IRS who are illegally operating in Thailand have to say, nor anybody else, okay? I agree with Mr. Trump on this, and what's right for the Americans in this case is also right for the Thais. Quoting further, because of the global tax deal and other discriminatory foreign tax practices, American companies may face retaliatory international tax regimes. Is that what we want brought to Thailand? Retaliatory international tax regimes? Because that's what this government seems to want, or I should say specifically the core coalition party of this government, who seems to think it's a good idea to be at the World Economic Forum right now, rather than having our prime minister back here governing our own country. Quoting further, if the United States does not comply with foreign tax policy objectives, yet again for Thailand, notwithstanding our conflict of law statute here in Thailand, and notwithstanding the fact that it's restricted for foreigners to come in here and advise regarding tax law in Thailand, we do have these folks, and they are saying that we somehow have to be entangled in some kind of quantum tax entanglement with every other OECD member, and therefore have to be in this totalitarian police state where all of our transactions are surveilled and traced, and we have to have wealth extracted from us, notwithstanding the fact that this money that they say oftentimes is subject to taxation has been taxed more than once before. It's just another extractive measure by a globalist elite who are trying to steal from the smallest people on the totem pole, and I'm sick of it. I'm very glad to see a president finally articulating the very values that founded our country in the United States. And again, I think that Thailand needs to take a page from this book, because all of this stuff, if it befalls Thailand, will destroy our economy. It's why we need to reject the OECD forthwith and outright, and we need to get rid of all of these foreigners, foreign interlopers specifically, coming into this country, telling us how our tax system should work. Quoting further, this memorandum recaptures our nation's sovereignty and economic competitiveness by clarifying that the global tax deal has no force or effect in the United States. Quoting further, applicability of the global tax deal. The Secretary of the Treasury and the permanent representative of the United States to the OECD shall notify the OECD that any commitments made by the prior administration on behalf of the United States with respect to the global tax deal have no force or effect within the United States, absent an act by the Congress adopting the relevant provisions of the global tax deal. Yeah, exactly. All of this has been done under color of law. Congress never passed a law. Just like here in Thailand, Parliament hasn't promulgated an act that says, oh, now you have an affirmative duty to file taxes. You have an affirmative duty to file tax returns. That's not been passed. There's no law on this. It's color of law. It's the same nonsense that got us stuck into COVID. A bunch of apparatchiks telling us what we had to do, calling it a mandate or a rule or some other administrative guideline, when in reality there were no laws behind it. It's just a bunch of charlatans pretending there's a law in order to get us to go along with it. And once we go along with it, we're stuck in the trap. We're in the corral. We are forever basically in serf to these people. You know, and it's good to see that the president is saying, hey, we're rescinding this. And quoting further, the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States Trade Representative shall take all additional necessary steps within their authority to authorize implement the findings of this memorandum. Well, in the case of Thailand, we don't even have to do that. We haven't passed the OECD. We're not in it, notwithstanding the fact that apparently the core coalition members seem to want to pretend we are and force us all as a nation into this nonsense, notwithstanding the fact the biggest, arguably the major superpower in the world that was in this thing is already leaving it. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know, I don't know what does. But meanwhile, again, we don't have to vote on anything to get out of this, and I don't care what any of these stamp pimps say, okay? There is no affirmative duty per se to file a tax return in Thailand. Now, there may be certain circumstances wherein you may have to file a tax return, depending on your circumstances, but there is no global minimum tax. Thailand hasn't signed on to it, and by the way, as I've discussed in other videos, the doctrine of codification still applies in a civil law country. Where is the law that says all people in Thailand must file a tax return? Where is that law? Oh, it doesn't exist, does it? No, you're coming in here, you're trying to use influence. Again, quoting from this directly, allows extraterritorial jurisdiction over American income. I couldn't think of a better way to describe it. Extraterritorial jurisdiction over Thai income. And in this circumstance, we haven't even promulgated anything to effect to allow this. Okay, yeah, we signed a memorandum of understanding that we'd look into it, Hey, is it sufficient to say that we've looked into it? It's terrible, and all of this fear-mongering and hyperbole by these stamp pimps has resulted in the possibility that we may lose large swaths of our expat retiree population. We may lose large swaths of people who want to come invest here, and we may lose large swaths of tourists because nobody wants to put up with a totalitarian country that, by dint of the fact that you simply go there, now magically you owe tax to them. Everything associated with the OECD needs to be scrapped. This global minimum tax is nonsense. I applaud Mr. Trump for pointing this out, and I hope Thailand, cooler heads here in this country, see the wisdom of this course of action and act accordingly.